Right, I'm going to get started. So this is the sample that I made as a demo example. It's A6 side fold greeting card, but I won't be doing a card today. I'm going to be, as per Monday, if you were here you would have seen, or if you've watched a YouTube video, you will see that I used, I popped it into a journal. So this is what I did on Monday, and that's just a version of a greeting card that I did. And I'll be doing similarly today, in that I'll be replicating this card onto my journal. If you can hear that noise in the background, apologies, it shouldn't be too loud, it shouldn't affect the live too much. It's just next door having some renovations done, so it's a bit noisy, but it shouldn't be a problem. So that's what I'll be doing today in the journal. To do that, I'll be using the Sunflower Grunge from Visible Image, which is a new one for me, not in their range, but a new one to me. I only used it for the first time yesterday. And for the background, I'll be using the Shiny Diamonds from Alex Siberia Designs. I only have a few of their items because they stopped selling in the UK for a little while. But I do believe they're back selling in the UK now. And then there will be some Distress Oxides. And for the first time on a live, I will be doing some alcohol pen colouring, which I've been a bit apprehensive about doing. I've deliberately not done it in the past because it can take a little while to do, to be honest. I tend to lose myself in it. It can be quite a process, but I have practiced. There's not much detail in the stamp that I'm using. It doesn't take long to colour the sunflower in, so I will go ahead and be doing that today. There's only 2 colours involved, so it shouldn't be too time costly. I think that's all I need to mention, so I'm going to get to it. I'm just going to pop my box aside. I've actually wrote a little list of, because there's quite a few steps in this one, so I've actually wrote myself a little list so that I don't get flustered and I remember. Ignore the handwriting, but so that I remember in which order to do everything and not miss anything out. I did miss 1 or 2 steps out yesterday, which was a little bit annoying. But right, I am going to get to it. So I have cut down the card already. I'll pop that there. I'll pop these here because I'll be using those. So I am going to give it a black background, and then I'll be working on, again, some 300 GSM white super smooth. There's no water really involved apart from some yellow splat. Oh my goodness, I'm really sorry, I'm a bit gassy. That'll teach me for drinking a soda. So yes, so there'll be a few inky splats of yellow, but other than that, there'll be no water involved. But the super smooth is essential for using alcohol markers to get that lovely blend. So I'm going to pop the black card aside because I'll come back to that at the end, and I'm going to work straight onto this. I'm going to pop my journal aside because I won't need that until the end. So the first thing I'll need to do is stamp my image, and I will heat emboss it, which is a great tip if you are not very confident with colouring with alcohol markers and colouring within the lines. Heat embossing is a great way. It gives the stamp a bit of a verge for the pens to hit against, so that it doesn't go outside the lines, if that makes sense. So it keeps everything within where you want it. So I'm just going to get my black embossing powder. Sorry, I'll be using clear embossing powder and a black ink. There's still no one here, so I'm not too sure what's happened. I don't know if there's been something technical has gone on. There was a few people that said they would definitely be here, but I'll pop it up on YouTube anyway as a tutorial. So I'll use a slimline slimline stamping block for this one. Now I think the card that I'm working on today is a bit smaller than this, so I may not get all the bottom in there, which is fine. I wasn't actually going to get all the bottom in there initially anyway, because it didn't look very grounded otherwise, but we'll see how we get on. So for this, I'm using Versafine Onyx Black, just because this one doesn't dry straight away and it gives me a chance to emboss. If it dries straight away, as you know, you can't get your embossing powder on there before it dries. It will just fall off. So I'm just going to position that. It looks as though I will be getting much of this stamp in there, so that's fine. And then just give that a firm impression. This one, the centre of the stamp is really quite detailed. It's really quite, and against the black ink, it really is quite special when it's printed. There we go. So I'm just going to use my trusted chamois and just give that a wipe over. Right. Don't want to spend too much time faffing around with this because I need to get that ink, the embossing powder on there. So let's just get that out of the way now. And I'm going to go in with the clear embossing powder. Now I'm trying to use clear embossing powder more because it's more forgiving. So if you use a pigment ink as opposed to a fast drying ink, if that embossing powder goes in places you don't want it, it doesn't show up as much as if it were black ink, black powder, beg your pardon. So it gives you the same effect, but you don't get the little strays everywhere in places that they're not supposed to be. So you can see that's muted it where the powder's stuck down at the moment. And so I'm going to go ahead and heat that. So bear with, the heat tool is coming in. It hasn't actually stamped here, but that's fine. By the time I colour that area in, I'll just add a little black outline to the area that it hasn't completely stamped. It's actually setting really quick today. I haven't used the tool yet, so must be having a good day. Mum, if you're there, can you just confirm you're there, please? Okay, so that's where we are just now. So that's all been heat set. This is the area that hasn't quite taken, so I'll just I'll colour that as if in fact I'll just draw the line in first, and then that gives me something to work with. So I'm just looking for a pigment pen, but I've just moved my desk around, so I've lost everything. Bear with, because this isn't working. Oh, thanks, Mum. Alright, great. And Looney too. My only two viewers then. Okay. So I'm just filling that part in that didn't quite stamp. There we go, and that gives me something to work with now that I'm going in with the colours. Right, so a bit about the colours, the alcohol pens. Any alcohol pens, there's none more superior than others. I've been through pretty much all of them, to be honest. These are my go-tos. They are a little bit more pricey, but they do the job better for me. So these are the Copic Chows. The Copic Sketch are exactly the same, just in a wider barrel. They are pricier, so I try not to buy those ones as much. Anyway, irrelevant. They all do the same job, but colouring can take a bit of practice. There's no skill to it, anyone can do it. So the way I do it is I'll pick an area. So I'm going to start with the sunflower leaves, and I like to put down the lightest colour first all over the area, because that gives the next colour something to grab onto and work with. So I'm just going to very loosely, and the beautiful thing is where I heat embossed, I'm not risking picking up any of the ink from the stamped image. So I'm just going to very loosely colour in these leaves. I have gone out, but I'm really not, I'm not going to cry over it. Literally, there's no, at this stage, no precision. And I can really quite easily just go over all them embossed areas. So this is of the Copic markers. I call them Copics, everyone calls them Copics. But this is Y08 Acid Yellow. Now really I should have referenced the sunflower a little better before I did this. But the beauty of crafting, colouring is you have complete artistic license. If I wanted this sunflower to be blue, it could have been blue. There's no right or wrong in crafting, it's your own interpretation. And I think everything, if it's handmade, is just as beautiful as the next. Flaws, warts and all. So that's my first colour gone down. Even if you don't like blending, you could leave that as it is. No one's requiring you to add shade or dimension in there. So you could quite easily leave that as it is. You don't need to be a professional to do this type of work. I've smudged my pigment pen there, but it's fine because later on I'll be doing some ink work over the top anyway, some stencil work. Right, so I've gone from, I'm using 4 colours, and now using the lightest, that's done. Then I go from the lightest to the darkest. There is a method to my madness. So I pick out the darkest areas. Now for me, the darkest areas are going to be where the petals meet the centre of the flower. And I'm literally just very loosely just going round that centre area as quick as easy as that. And then what I do is then bring in the second to darkest, and I use that to drag out that darker colour. So I literally pull it, so I place it down and drag it out, and so far that's blended the darkest colour into the second darkest colour. So you can see already we've added some dimension really easily as well. So we're back to where we started, and all that, there's no line now where that dark colour met the light colour. Hello Maddie, how are you? So you can see at the moment we've only got one harsh line. That's where I use the second to darkest, but where I use the darkest colour, there's no line, it's blended, as easy as that. And then the third darkest, or the second lightest, is the Y17. And then all I do is, yet again, pull out that second colour, and already that line is already breaking away. That harsh line that we did see is already breaking away. I'm good, thanks, Maddie. Thank you for joining. Literally as easy as that. If there's more detail in your stamp, then perhaps that can call for a little bit more precision, but it's not necessary. And then finally, I'll go back in with my lightest colour, which was the Y08 again. And that's the colour that I put down in the first instance, the base colour. And then I'll just blend those lines. That third colour, I'll just blend back out into the lightest area with the lightest pen again. Normally for ink alcohol markers, I use 3 colours, 3 shades of the same colour. But this one, it just didn't seem dark enough, to be honest. It didn't seem like there was much of a blend. So for the centre, I'm going in with the YR68. Because there's so much black detail in the middle, doesn't need anything fussy in here. I'm literally just going in, covering that whole central area. I think that area of the sunflower is like a browny colour, isn't it? So that's the head of the flower done, and now we're going to move on to the stem and the leaves. And this is just as easy as the head. I'm going to start with my lightest colour, and that is G03. And as before, I'm just going to pop that down all over the leaf. This part is, I love this part where you can just colour in and do the whole bit, no fuss needed. Just colour that whole image. And then I'm only using, did I say I'm only using 3 for the leaf? It only called for 3, so I'm using. Now I'm moving on to the darkest of the 3 shades. So this is G28. And what I'm going to do is, in my mind, the outside of the leaves are going to catch the light better. That's only in my mind. There's no theory behind that. I'm sure if you looked at the leaf, it'd be a real leaf, it'd be completely different. But all I like to do is pick an area, recognise where the light might hit it. And for me, in that moment, that's where my lightest colour is going to be, and then I work towards the darkest colour. So for me, the darkest area is going to be the inner of the leaf, like the veiny parts, or the most veiny part. And I'm really loosely putting down the dark of the green there. And then also here is a fold. And so that's naturally going to cause a shade as well. So just where the fold meets the leaf, I'm going to just add a bit of shade in there. And that's it. And then I'm going in with the middle colour, which is G07. And I'm just going to pull that dark colour out again, but not entirely all the way to the outside edge, because as I've said, that's going to be my lightest part. I'm a bit cat-handed, so just moving it around as I work. And now you can see where the lightest area is taking shape. And now I'll go back in again with the lightest of the shades, which is G03. And I'm just going to pull that middle colour out to the outside of the leaf. And that gives us some dimension there. So you can see there's light around the edges, the darkest is in the centre. The folded part, I assume, is going to be lighter, and then I've given some shade to where it meets the leaf. I'm just going to repeat that for the next leaf. So we've got the G03 going all over that. It's a really straightforward process. And it's really enjoyable. You can really lose yourself in colouring. I know adult colouring was a huge craze, wasn't it, some years ago? I'm not sure if it still is thought of in the same way. There's normally a new fad, but it really is. I can understand why it's so mindful. The darkest, G28, same as before, going straight in the middle over the most condensed veiny part. again, I'm just throwing that colour down. I'm not being precise with that. Going in with a second, the middle colour, the middle shade, G07. Pulling that darkness out into the light. And then finally going back in with the G03, the lightest colour, and just blending that middle shade into itself. And that really is it. So I'm going to colour the stem with the darkest of those, G28. I hate that chisel nib on brush. You've got, on the Copics, you've got a chisel nib, which I really am not a fan of. I don't use that very much at all, but this brush nib is heaven. Absolute heaven. So I'm going to use that G28 and I'm just going to colour the stem of that flower in. Now I think this was the most timely process, which is why I've always avoided it up till now. So hopefully we'll move much quicker from this part onwards. So I'm going to pop my colours away now. And the next thing I'm going to do is stencil. So we've got quite a delay here, but that's where we're at the moment. So no artistry involved there at all. So stencil. So as I mentioned at the top, I'm using the Alex Siberia Shiny Diamonds. Now, if you are very fussy, you might want to cover this in either a mask or masking fluid. However, I am going to be quite slapdash with it, but I quite like the outcome of that slapdash, to be honest. So I am getting my mucky mat, and all I'm going to do is blend in around, because we can quite clearly see that sunflower. I'm going to bring my colour in around that sunflower on the stencil, stopping short of the sunflower. So I'll be using 2 greens today. For the stencil I'll be using Mowed Lawn. I'm going to pick up my sponge pad, and again I'm just holding this down. I'm being a bit sloppy in the hope that none of this moves. And I'm just going to blend in, stopping just at the sunflower so we don't overlap it, and it's as easy as that. And for the smaller details, i.e. between the head and the leaf, you can just turn the blending tool on its side and go into those smaller areas, and then continue as you were, stopping short of the sunflower as we move around. And then this is where I get a bit cack-handed, so I apologise. I might be obscuring some of what I'm doing here, but I'm just going around the right hand side, doing exactly as I've just done, turning the tool on its side just to get in the smaller areas, and then back round as I was, just to complete the rest. And it is as quick and as easy as that. There we go. So for me, the masking is not entirely necessary, but if you're a bit fussier than I am, which I once was, once upon a time, I won't lie, but certainly for the sake of the live, I haven't got time for that. I'm pretty certain you haven't either. Right, so I'm just going to pop my stencil aside. So the next thing that I'm going to do is distress the edge. And for that, I'm going to use a different green, a darker green. This time, I'll be using Rustic Wilderness. So I'm just popping the Mowed Lawn aside. And you've seen me do this plenty of times, but I'm just going to very loosely bring that ink all around the edges there, and it starts to pull the card all together. I do like doing this. It is a bit of a staple of mine, to be honest, especially lately. Just ties all those colours together nicely. We've got the green to match the green from the leaves and the background. And stenciled background. So I don't want to go in too far here because we don't want to hit the sunflower. So I'm just being a bit more careful there. There we go. There's a bit there that's not blended as nicely as I'd like. There we go. So that's that done. That's the edge done. Blended nicely. And then the next step will be to bring some yellow in to tie in with the sunflower head. So all I'm going to do for that, oopsie, is I'll pop that aside. I didn't tell you actually, I was meant to show you, but what I do when I'm trying to find colours to colour, I have a bit of scrap card and I test all my colours out, and you can see that most of them I've run alongside each other just to see which ones work and blend into each other. But that's how I select colours for the colouring. So anyway, back to where we was. I'm using mustard seed. I'm just going to lay some of that down onto a stamp block. Anything with a non-porous surface is fine. I'll pop that away. And then I'm going to come in with my fan brush and some water. I'm just going to loosen that ink up, and then just with my finger just flick that over the panel. Simple as that. I am focusing, it is going over the sunflower, but that's the look I'm going for, but I am focusing around the edges, and I think I'm going to leave it at that. I don't want to over egg it, so bear with. I'm just going to pop this aside because I don't want to knock it. Sorry about that. And actually, if you don't mind, I'm just going to take the opportunity to have a glug of drink. Okay, so I'm just going to clean that stamp block up. So that is going to need a bit of heating to dry it. So let's just wipe that over, pop that out of the way so we don't get too mucky. And let's bring in that heat tool, shall we? It shouldn't need too much heating. So this all that splatter, it sort of echoes the splatter that was part of the stamped image, and it does really give it that grungy effect that, as per the title of the stamp. Also, what I was going to do, I'm not going to risk it on this occasion, but just to tie in with that black splatter that is on the stamp, I was going to use a black splatter on there, but I didn't want to darken it too much, so I avoided it. But maybe another time I should try that. So the next thing I'm going to do is, we've greened the borders, but I'm going to add some gold details around the border, so just a gold edge. So for that, I'm going to use the Wow Mixed Media Embossing Brush from inspired by Seth Apter, which is just essentially the embossing liquid that's in the ink pads in a bottle form with a brush, and then some gold embossing powder from Cosmic Shimmer at Creative Expressions. So this is just the bright gold metallic, and I'm gonna get on with that. So this is really gloopy, and you do get quite a lot. It's actually comparable to nail polish, so you have to take quite a lot of the excess off. But again, as per much of my work, there's not a lot of precision needed, so I'm just literally dragging that along the edge of the card, and it goes on denser in some areas than others, but the rugged sort of look, the broken edges, that's more of what I'm looking for, to be honest, because it suits the whole theme of the card. So we'll just do all this in one go. It doesn't dry quickly at all. So perhaps what I should have done, and we'll soon find out if it's been detrimental to me, is perhaps gone over the whole thing with my anti-static, because I've inked the background, haven't I, with the stencil, and I may well find that the gold sticks. But again, not too sore. It's not going to go, we could brush most of it off, and it's not going to go too far against the whole look of the card. So again, that's done. And I'm just looking for, oh there it's here. We've used it, haven't we, already? I'm just going in with that gold embossing powder. Ah, that's fine. It hasn't grabbed anywhere that it doesn't want to, or where I don't want it to. I'm sure that this wants to grab wherever it can. Just shaking off the excess as I go. There we go. So let's decant that back in to the pot, and we can get that out of the way. And then again, I'm going in with a heat tool, so bear with. So it's quite a thick border. You can go on and maximise that or reduce it to your liking. Some of it's bubbling there, and when it's bubbling you need to move on. Time to move on. So there was quite a lot of embossing liquid on there, so I'll just give that a moment to set. And I'm going to grab that gold back again, because the next technique will be calling for that again. And so what I'm going to do here is use the gold embossing powder, but just in a different way. So again, the bright gold, and I'm just going to take some pinches of that. I'm just going to find some areas on the card and just give a loose sprinkle of that embossing powder. And I'm doing a little bit more than what I did on the sample. I wasn't quite happy with the placement of where I did it on the sample. It looked a bit too uniform. There we go. Right, and then I'll be heat setting again, but this time you don't want to go in. I mean, most people heat set from behind anyway. I just haven't cracked that habit. But on this example, you do need to go from the underneath. If you go from the top, obviously what's going to happen with the air coming out, it's going to blow your embossing powder all around. So I'm going to heat set from the underside of this, and that will prevent that embossing powder blowing around, because it's not sticking to any ink, is it, this time? So literally just holding it underneath. You may see some smoke. It's only the card burning, don't you worry. It's really hard to see from where I am, actually, if that's set. I can't tell if that's setting or... No, it's not setting quite yet, so... Okay. So I've over egged that top one with a heat tool. So I've got it at an angle now where I can see that it's setting okay. So all that's done is that top one, that first one that I did, it's just, I suppose it's burnt away the embossing part of it and left behind the gold colour. So it's still there, it just hasn't got that shimmer to it. So, oh, there we go, and I think that's pretty much set. There we go. So that's how we're looking right now. Because there's a delay, I'm moving it around, and hopefully with what I'm doing you'll be able to see the effect that has had. I can't quite see live. Right, so I'm going to tie everything together, which means putting everything now into the journal. So I'm going to bring the journal in with the black card. I am going to gut the card, because let's face it, card is expensive and I can use the centre for something else. I'm just folding that back and literally just leaving around a 1 centimetre frame to give me something to glue to. It's no need, and also, you know, where it's going in my journal, we want to take away as much weight as we can. It's not like a card where you can add as much weight as you want, and all you've got to worry about is the postage then, isn't it, if you're sending it via Royal Fowl. There we go. So I'm just popping that aside. I can use that for another project. And then I'm just coming in with some wet glue, wet adhesive. But that's decided not to work. Let's go with a larger nozzle. I'm just going around the edge because I've only got an outline to stick this to anyway. Okay. So I've given that around 2 to 3 mil border. I'm just going to hold that down, let that grab. Shouldn't take 2 moments. And then I'll move on to the sentiment, not before sticking this down in the journal. So it has leaked out, and all I do is go around with my thumb and just picking up all the excess glue there. I mean, it dries clear anyway, but that still shows, doesn't it? The clear glue still shows up. And there we go. And then a bit round here. There we go. So I'm going to stick this in the journal now and get that phase done. Again, just going around the edge. I'm going to stand that up because it is exact measurement, so this is the easiest way of sticking that down. I'm just going to push that down again. In fact, what I'm going to do is open that up and then push it down now. That should do it. And then perhaps not really got anything heavy to sit on top of that, but I'm going to trust in the fact that that is grabbed. I've got a bit of spillage there. There we go. Right, so now I'm going to move on to the sentiment. So for that I am going to use a sentiment from the same stamp set. So I'm going to bring that back in. So that is Sunflower Grunge. Now, for a card, the most relevant one here for me was the Happy Birthday. That is a sentiment that someone would appreciate. Perhaps Have a Sunshine Day is great for a greeting card. Because it's in a journal, I think I'm going to go with Sunflower because it has no, you know, it's a bit more, it doesn't need to be as direct, right? So I'm going to go with Sunflower. And I am going to do that in the same manner as I did before, which is on the black, and emboss that in white. So get a bit of black card. I'm going to see if I've got any that are already pre-cut to the perfect size, which might be this one. Yep. So what I do is when I'm trimming card down, I keep all the slivers that are large enough to hold a sentiment, and I've got pots that I put them all in so that I haven't got to trim down from a large piece of card in the future. Yeah, get well card, that'd be a good one. So I'm going to go in with my anti-static. We don't want to take any risks. And I'm just going to find my embossing ink. So I'm just going to go in with the Versamark standard. And then hopefully I can line this up without bringing my head into shot. And hopefully that's central also. I'm just going to clean that up. Pop that away and pop that stamp away, because we don't want the stamps exposed when you're working with embossing powder, because then they get all mucky, they lose their grip, and then they don't stamp as clearly as they perhaps should. So for that one I'm going in with white. So let's bring in my paper and let's find some white. This is just an old Lisa Horton embossing powder. It probably doesn't look like this nowadays. I suspect this is when Lisa first went independent from creative expressions. So with this one I find that if you hit off the excess too much, you actually take off quite a lot of the powder that you need. So don't be too rigorous with that one, or you you risk losing what you want to emboss. Oh, thanks, Mum. So actually I've gone too far to the left and I won't be able to do the flagged corner. But I might either stick this down on the right, or I might just stick it down in the same place without the flagged corner. We'll see. So let's bring that back in. So I might either pop it there and then give the corner a diagonal. No, it still seems to work here for me. So I'm just going to trim that down. I'll give that a straight edge. And then let's just stick that down. There we go. So I'm just going to hold this up so that I know it's straight. And I'm going to bring it over the border so that it lines up with the edge of the black background. There we go. I think what I might do, which I didn't do before, is I might just have a little extra sparkle on there, just because I can. And I'm just going to roughly go in over those leaves with my Spectrum Noir sparkle, clear sparkle, because let's just imagine it's catching that sun and the sparkle is all that beautiful sun reflection. That hasn't come out as sparkly as I'd have liked. I'm just going to squeeze into that and give that another coat. Hopefully it just needed some of the liquid brought down the barrel. No, not a huge amount of sparkle, but that'll do. And that's it. So that's the finished project. So this was the card, and then this is the journal insert. And you can see what I mean. This one was more relevant for giving as a greeting card to someone. The sentiment was more relevant for that purpose. But for here, the sunflower sentiment, or the sunflower word text, was more suited to the journal. And there we go, that's it. So what I'm going to do is I'll pop this up on, I'll remove it from YouTube at some point today, and then pop it up onto, sorry, I'll remove it from Facebook at some point today and pop it up on YouTube. Do you know what I didn't do was add the white highlight. So let me just add the white highlight. So what I do with this, in the same way as I did with the colouring, just pick out some areas where I'm going to assume the sun is hitting. In fact, I'll rub that away because that's the shaded area. And then just exaggerate those areas by adding some white highlight. So this is a really subtle, this is more like a chalk marker than a gel pen. It gives more of a white highlight, so it blends in with the work, the alcohol ink pen work that you've already done. It doesn't stand out as much. So I'm literally just around each of these petals, I'm just going around one of the edges, and that just highlights where the light is coming in. There's no right or wrong to this. quite therapeutic as well, just in the same way as colouring with alcohol markers is. There we go. And then I'll just add some here as well. I'll just make it a bit denser in one area and then pull it out a bit. There we go. Right, that really is it now. That is where I'm going to be leaving it. But another page done in the journal, which I'm really happy with. I really like that. So we've got the 2 now. It'll be lovely to look back on one day. But it's a great way of experimenting with card layouts perhaps. So once you've done this, you might think, oh, I quite like that. Whereas I've done it the other way round first, you might pop it into your journal if you have one, and then decide that might be good enough to transfer onto a greeting card by just changing the sizes perhaps and the sentiment. It's a great way of experimenting. So there we go. So I'm going to be popping that up on YouTube. Otherwise, thank you for joining, and I will see everyone again either next Monday at 6 PM for a Danny Doodles craft demo. If not, same time next Wednesday at 1 PM for just me using my own stash. Right, thank you everyone for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.